First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
There it is, a great shot of Seaside right now out there at the Oregon coast. Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now. Appreciate you joining us wherever you found us. Thanks for being here today. And you know, if you live here in the Northwest, you know how amazing the Oregon coast, the Washington coast can be. It's always nice to be out there, but it's also dangerous. We have reports every year of people who either get swept away by sneaker waves or boats capsizing. And it turns out there is a reason that the tidal waves here are actually perhaps worse than other places or bigger. And we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be discussing also some ways to stay safe out there. I said tidal waves, the tidal current, however you want to phrase that. You know what? We've got an expert here to talk about that, and that is why we have Charles Loos, the ocean coach, who's joining us to talk all about this. And Charles, appreciate you being here with us today. To start off, why don't you, if you could, just explain to everybody, you know, your history there with the Oregon coast and being the ocean coach.
Sure. You know, there's so many boaters in Oregon enjoying the rivers, enjoying the lakes, playing in the sun. They have this boat, yet they've got an eye on the ocean. And they're a little afraid of the ocean, and for good reasons. Crossing the bar and going into the wild North Pacific is daunting. So I had so many friends coming to me, offering to buy me a burger and a beer or coffee and say, hey, you know, explain tide to me, or tell me how to get across the bar, or how do I look at the weather forecasts? And it became so frequent that I decided maybe there's a business here. So I started Ocean Coach about 5 years ago, and I teach people how to make that leap into the ocean with their boat and do it with confidence and style and launch their lifetime of adventure.
Well, and you know, it really is. You hear all the stories about how difficult it is getting out into the ocean from the Oregon coast, wherever it is that you're going out, whether it's from Tillamook or Seaside or anywhere else. Why is that? Why is that specific to Oregon and Washington? Is that different other places? Why do you always hear about how difficult it is?
We're tough up here in the Northwest. The wind blows hard. The swells come from across the Pacific. Our tides are big. It's tough. It's tough sledding up here, but with proper knowledge, it can be done quite easily. And really, it comes down to fundamental knowledge of wind, swell, and tide. And that's what I teach my clients. And once you understand it, you learn at every trip, and you know what you're seeing. And it's perfectly reasonable to have a very safe, wonderful time, whether you're a boater or a beachgoer or you're a crabber or whatever. It just comes down to a little bit of understanding.
Well, walk us through some of that. What kind of understanding would you normally teach somebody, especially for a base level for people who are going out there?
Well, let's talk about what is tide. You know, it's a word that's kind of thrown around a lot, but all tide is the water level in the ocean going up and going down slowly. And imagine there's a giant pier built at Seaside. It's 1,000 feet long. You walk out to the end, it's low tide. You look over the railing, you see the water level. 6 hours later, that water level is 10 feet higher. That's the difference between low tide and high tide. 10 feet is a lot. It's a lot. So that's all it is. Water level goes up, water level goes down. Now, a 10-foot difference in water level can expose or cover hundreds and hundreds of yards of beach width, of course. So, you know, let's start with that. Our tides are big. The span can be up to 11 feet. And compared to the rest of the world, that's a lot. That's a lot of water moving back and forth. So from the beachgoer's point of view, if you get down there at low tide, that water might be coming up quickly and far. And just to give you some indication, on a really big tidal span, the water level can come up a half inch a minute, almost a half inch a minute. Now imagine that. That's almost fast enough to see. So if you're clamming down at Seaside or Gearhart and you park your car, you know, down near the water's edge and you get to clamming, before you know it, that water can be up around your tires. Or if you set up your beach towel down near the low tide line, that water comes up fast. So that's one thing that we have to deal with that the people in Florida and New Jersey don't really have to deal with, is just the raw span of the tides.
And I have one of the graphics here actually that you sent in, just kind of demonstrating a little bit of some of the differences. Can you tell me what we're looking at here?
Sure. We're looking at tide charts, and along the bottom is time of day. The middle is noon. The end is midnight. And along the top is the height of the tide. Now, let's start with New Jersey. 2 high tides a day, 2 low tides a day. Notice the 2 high tides are the same height. The 2 low tides are the same height. Go over to Oregon, and it's a wild situation. We have 2 high tides, but they're very different heights. You have 2 low tides, they're very different heights. So unless you're looking at the tide table, this doesn't make any sense, because low tide is a certain level, and then 12 hours later, it's a wildly different level. So you need to be a little bit understanding of that. Now in Mississippi, the tidal span, they only have 1 tide a day, and the tidal span is 2 feet. In New Jersey, it's 6 feet. Here, it's 11 feet. So our tides are bigger, and I don't want to say unpredictable, because they are 100% predictable with the tide tables. But if you don't know what you're looking at, it's really confusing.
So this is why it's very important to look at what the tidal wave schedule is when you're looking at those things and understanding. So why is it so much bigger in Oregon?
Oh, the physics between the sun and the moon and the Earth's rotation and all that, I don't think we need to get into that. It's complicated.
Okay. It's just
Let's
know
just
that
put
it
that
is.
It is, and don't worry yourself trying to figure out. Generally, the farther north from the equator, the bigger the tides are, but it's a lot more complicated than that.
Okay. So understanding that part, that there is this big difference, up to 11 feet at certain points, what's the next thing that we should know?
Well, as a beach goer, let's say you're a family, you got a couple of kids, you want to go to the beach. Things are just easier if you go on an outgoing tide. Show up an hour after high tide. That means the water is going out. The beach is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, wider and wider and wider. The tide pools are starting to reveal themselves. You can walk out farther. You get that delicious smell of the low tide. You can explore. And it's really quite a protection against rising water. So, start an hour after high tide and enjoy your time there. Especially if it's one of these big tides. Now, I showed you the graph before. Sometimes the tidal span isn't much. It's 3 or 4 feet. Well, then the tide isn't so important for the beachgoer. But on one of these big tides, understand what you're getting into. And low tide is just more relaxing and more fun. There's another reason, and that it reduces the chance of sneaker waves. Now, sneaker waves is kind of a catch-all term. It's generally the ocean being the ocean and a combination of situations coming together. But if the water level is going down, if it's generally ebbing and the beach is getting wider, your chance of a sneaker wave coming or hurting you is much, much less. Because the problem with a sneaker wave often is that water comes sheeting up the beach, the kids are running, people are getting their towels wet, it goes all the way up to the high tide line and it grabs a log. All that debris up at the top of the beach. And once that log starts swishing out back toward the surf, now it's a battering ram. People are panicking and all that. If you're there when the water level is going out, you're just going to have a much safer, more enjoyable, easier time of it. So I would say, get a tide table. There are dozens of apps on your phone, and look at it. And you're looking at 2 things, the time of the tide and the height of the tide. Those are both equally important.
So study that and then know exactly which time to go out. Yeah, you're right. A log as a battering ram would not be a fun experience.
It's not a fun experience.
What's the next thing we should look at? I know we've got some other demonstrations here too, a video demonstration, but whatever you want to go to.
Well, let's talk to the boaters. So if you imagine our big bays and the water level in the ocean changing so rapidly, it really makes our harbor mouths act more like rivers than anything else. When the tide is going out, you have this tremendous current going out towards sea. When the tide is coming in, you have a big current coming in. So if you're just innocently crabbing in Netart's Bay, for example, and a big outgoing tide, you're essentially in a river. And if your motor dies or whatever, that river can sweep you out to sea. And a lot of people get into trouble like that. So whereas I said for the beach goer, you're better off going on an outgoing tide. For boaters, you really want an incoming tide. So it's kind of a different thing. Now, I do have some video of a big outgoing tide at Netart's. Once you roll that, this is not a river. This is Netart's Bay on a strong ebb tide.
I have gone crabbing.
And you can see
this is Netart's Bay. Wow.
Yeah. You can see there's rapids. So imagine you're a crabber and you're in this. Here you were looking upstream a little bit, and your motor dies. You are being swept out to the ocean very quickly. And if you're getting swept out in a 10-foot winter surf, that's not a good outcome.
Yeah, taking a look at this, I think the video will kind of come back around, but that is a lot of sand just being knocked off, and that's just in the bay right there. So, I mean, this is an outgoing tide. That's what we're looking at.
Yes, it is. Yes,
Okay.
it is.
I can see why people would be swept out.
Yeah. Yeah,
not
yeah.
about-
So it's just a little Jedi mind trick. Think of our harbor mouths more as rivers than just static bodies of water. And look at your tide table, and you'll be able to tell which way the river is flowing, if you will.
Well, this is some great advice. Yeah, I mean, that is just incredible, just coming through right there. So going from there, understanding, getting a better understanding, and actually visually looking at that is pretty shocking, seeing how that is. So from there, what else should people know? What else should people know when they're going out there? Obviously, be aware, check the schedule. Know where the tides are, know what the dangers are, know what the worries are, especially if you're boating or out there just for a nice day. What else should people be aware of?
This stuff is fun. I suggest people enjoy the knowledge, enjoy looking at the tide chart and seeing noting what they see on the beach. It's fun to talk about at parties. It's fun to take your kids. But there's something that's really a fun part. If you could put up the moon slide, if you got a second there.
Mm-hmm. I do. I'll grab that one.
So it turns out when the moon is full, you have a large tidal span at the beach. Worldwide, since the beginning of time to the end of time, you look up at and you see a full moon, the tidal span at the beach is going to be big. You're going to have your 10-foot swings, your 11-foot swings. Conversely, if you see the quarter moon over there on the left, it looks like a half, but they call it a quarter moon, the tidal span is going to be small. So it's kind of fun to, as you're taking your evening walk with your dog, look up at the sky, wherever you are in the world, and you will know something of the tides just by looking. It was one of the first pieces of knowledge our ancestors figured out about the ocean hundreds of thousands of years ago, and it's very useful.
That is, yeah, I see. I've learned quite a bit here just already. So with all of this knowledge, this is actually really great stuff that I feel like everybody should know, and a lot of people don't know when they're going out to the coast on how to stay safe. And you hear reports of it all the time, as I mentioned there at the beginning, of people, getting into trouble out there in whatever way, shape, or form that is. So for everybody out there, what's one more piece of advice that you would have for everyone going out to the coast?
High tide is an hour later each day. So if you look at the tide table for Saturday and it's high at 1, the next day it'll be high at 2. So between that and the moon, you know a lot without looking at the tide table. And I think as Oregonians, we should know this stuff because we have a big and challenging ocean. We should be proud of the way we use it. We should be proud of how gorgeous it is, the adventures you can have out there. For my boating clients, I've seen 50 humpback whales in a day out there. You see albatross. Wow. Setting people free to go to the beach and go to the ocean and be safe and be knowledgeable is the reason I do what I do. So Oregonians, grab that tide table and enjoy your waters.
Charles, where can people follow you and everything that you do?
TheOceanCoach.com will get you to my website. I have free information. I have handouts. I do classes. I do one-on-one coaching. So TheOceanCoach.com is the best way to get a hold of me.
Charles, thank you very much for joining us here today. This was really educational. I learned a lot, and I'm gonna watch out for. I'm gonna get my tide tables. I'm gonna understand what those are now, and make sure that I follow along with that. Charles, thanks for being here on Fox 12 Now.
Thank you, Greg. This was really fun.
Yes, it is. And thank you to everybody who's joining us here for Fox 12 Now. Again, this is our show here, streaming live on YouTube, on our apps, on our website. We appreciate you joining us. And we're live here every weekday at 1 p.m. Pacific. And I'm going to be back here in just a few minutes at 1:30 p.m. So whatever platform you're on, you can come right back here. And we're actually going to be talking to the Oregon Wildlife Foundation about an event they're having to showcase the canine units of the Oregon State Police designed to stop poachers. Yes, canines tracking down and working to stop poaching here in the state of Oregon, which is a big issue. So a pretty cool event they're having to spread some more education about that. So that's coming up here in just a few minutes. So come right back wherever you're watching. For right now, I'm signing off. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.